All right. Let's get fired up here.
Oh shit, we're recording.
Hello and welcome to the very next episode of Read Rothbard. This would be number 2, not to be confused with poo. ReadRothbard.com, you can find all the lectures, books, articles, and this podcast and our previous one. My name is Daniel, and with me, as always, is my friend and cohort, Robert Johnson. Robert.
Hey, everybody. Say hi. I did. I just jumped right in there, right over on top of you. Deal with it. That's what I do.
Now I need a safe space.
I don't blame you. So what's going on, Daniel?
Well, I thought we'd get on our conversation here and talk about a couple of ridiculous articles that we've seen out in the news over the past couple of weeks. Some of this might not be so fresh, but as always, the ideas of Rothbard are generally able to be applied, even though he, wrote many of his works 30, 40, 50 years ago now. You can still apply a lot of it today.
That's true. You like that comment? Enjoy it. There's plenty more of that coming.
That's a good one. You know what? I think one of the problems we have here is that there's no competition on the podcast. Perhaps we need to have even more cohorts and co-hosts, and then we can see who can come up with the best content and, talk over the others better and faster, right? Because it's competitive, right? It's a zero-sum game.
This is what I need then. I need some government-controlled protection to protect my job because I'm not very good at it. So if you were to bring in some protection or some other podcasters in here, I would quickly be exposed for the fraud that I am. And so I need some sort of a bill or some sort of lobbyist to make it illegal to do that. Yeah.
Wait, you sound a lot like a taxi driver.
What? Nice segue, buddy. On a segue. Yeah, so in the news lately, we got Uber, who has followed through on their promises to leave Austin when a law that the city of Austin enacted wasn't repealed. It was failed to be repealed. It was a law that required potential Uber drivers to become fingerprinted, as if the government doesn't already license drivers, as if Uber doesn't have the most interest in providing a safe service to its customers, whatever. People believe that regulation is necessary on these companies. So Uber and Lyft both said, all right, then we're out. We don't like this. We're talking about downgrading our service because there was a big lag time from the time of when someone got fingerprinted. It was 3 months to the point in which they could actually start working. And because the government system is shockingly inefficient, so there were some complaints back and forth between the city council and Uber, and so Uber basically said, okay, we're out. So what happens when a company leaves? That leaves a gap for an entrepreneur to come in and provide that service. We'll see how the Austin City Council responds, probably creating new legislation to fight any new people that come in and try and provide services. But, there's this new Facebook group that hopes to have an app out soon. It's called Arcade City. And they're seeing an opportunity in Austin now. And they are a decentralized ride-sharing company that's going to operate on tips and donations. And their CEO, this guy named Christopher David, he has got some dynamite quotes that really appeal to me. Here's one quote. Austin claims to be a hub for innovation. Let's see how they grapple with the inevitable irrelevance of corporations and governments thanks to the disintermediation revolution. Highly connected peer-to-peer ecosystems that harness the wisdom of crowds can self-organize and self-govern better than some arbitrary third party ever could. We really will decentralize all the things. The only question is whether the centralists will stand aside or actively resist the change. So I'm all for it. Go get them. I'm sure the Austin City Council will come up with some new crap to reduce the quality of service in Austin. I'm sure the taxi drivers are going to be up in arms about the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, until they can finally, maybe all the taxi drivers will die off. I don't know. That's what happens when entrenched monopolies get threatened. They respond with the violence of government to protect them from the efficiency and the service quality of competitors.
All right, so let me get this straight. So Austin, Texas, Uber and Lyft, which are ride-sharing services, started operating there. And like in many places, there wasn't any legislation in place that pertained to them, so they just started operating. And, I'd argue that that's totally fine. Clearly, there was a market for it because people used the service and were paying for it, rather than the alternatives, which were the entrenched government-protected monopoly taxi service, right? Or the what I hear is a notoriously bad public transit system in Austin, Texas.
Indeed. In fact, actually, Uber and Lyft were able to specialize greatly by having operating at a time when they could basically ferry home drunks, people leaving the bars in the evening, and the incidence of drunk driving went way down.
Wait, so weren't the taxi services already providing that, or not?
Well, probably they were, but probably not enough. As you are aware, taxi services operate under the idea of giving out taxi licenses to only a certain number of individuals. I mean, you can't just write taxi on your car and just start driving out and calling yourself a taxi. You have to get registered with a city and get some sort of an operating license, and those often come with high costs and fees, and they're just doled out very slowly, if at all. So here comes this service to fill in this gap in the market, and it's doing really well. People liked it.
Yeah.
And, so the government comes in and shuts that down real quick. As they do.
So they started imposing some regulations and restrictions then on the drivers and the companies themselves. Do you think that that's an effort to level the playing field? Because from what I understand, the taxis in any given area with the medallions that you're describing, they have all sorts of regulations and trainings and inspections and things, certain types of commercial insurance they need to have that these Uber and Lyft don't need to have. What do you say to that?
Right, so you'd have, they can operate at a more efficient level due to having a lower overhead. But that's the whole idea of having an entrenched monopoly is to protect yourself from competition so that you don't have to provide a better service. But you can still maintain your income level. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, I'm just saying that because the taxi industry in any given area already has so many regulations and trainings and certifications and types of insurance that are required, doesn't having some of that also be imposed on an Uber or Lyft just level the playing field? Wouldn't that be the argument?
I suppose that's the argument that is made. You're talking to people that believe that some arbitrary external third party has any right to regulate you. All regulation means is you must do this in order to do this, or else violence. They're saying that we're underneath these regulations. We have to do X, Y, and Z. So if you're going to be doing the same thing, you should have to do it too, because reasons.
Right, and there's a certain air of fairness in that sentiment, right?
That's usually the argument, is that, hey, it's not fair that we have to do this if we're going to be doing this providing this service. If we're going to be if we're going to be held to these regulations, you have to be held to these regulations too, so it's fair. Well, those regulations shouldn't exist. But if you're talking about, I know there's a big argument about, well, what are these people that are using these ride-sharing apps? Are they full-time employees? Are they contractors? Are they just your average Joe that is doing some carpooling? And where do you define and therefore regulate? How do you compare the two? And I would argue that you don't compare them at all. You have no right to compare them at all. It's none of your business.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be hard to identify whether you're just picking up a friend of yours or if you're an Uber driver, right? Like,
right.
How would they know?
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, there's legislation across the country and across Canada, specifically in what was it, Ottawa or I forget, Quebec, that would make it illegal to accept like any kind of form of payment for driving anybody around unless you were regulated and licensed and registered and all that crap. And like with huge fines and like jail time. So they're essentially so violence is instituted upon you if you want to give somebody a ride, and they happen to give you some money for that ride.
Right, and who is directly harmed when you give somebody a ride? I mean, obviously the taxi drivers are, I guess, indirectly harmed in the loss of potential revenue, but you know, if AM/PM opens up across the street from 7-Eleven, you're not going to point guns at 7-Eleven or AM/PM and say, hey, you're taking some potential revenue from the other.
Right. That's the cost of doing business. I mean, that's the risk of doing business at any time and anywhere. So to decry competition, like saying you shouldn't have to have competition, is just ridiculous. I mean, like we've said before, not on this podcast yet because this is still early, but if you are granted a monopoly, and that's always the complaint of taxi services, is that, you know, they won't pick up a black man in Harlem or what have you, because you have this entrenched service that doesn't have to compete with anybody. So how would you even know you're providing the best possible service? You don't have anybody else to compare yourself with. So, and it also allows you to be racist. It allows you to not pick up a fare because there's another one just around the corner and you're not in competition with anybody else, so who cares? I'll just pick up the next guy that I feel more comfortable picking up, or what have you.
Because there's a limit on the number of supply, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's only so many taxis available, and there's more people demanding rides than there are taxis. So a driver could
artificially
and choose.
Supply.
Right, so it's a seller's market. They're selling their taxi services, and they have their pick of whoever. So if they happen to like tall blonde women, that's who they're going to pick up.
Sure, they got their pick of the litter. They don't have to compete with anybody. So then people complain about, hey, I can't get a cab. Well, maybe if you expanded the number of cabs that are allowed to be in your city.
Let's talk about why are there these limitations on the number of medallions, like, and why are there these regulations and insurance requirements? I mean, isn't it all about public safety? You know, I mean, isn't that what they would say?
That's probably what that's the running line, I suppose. That they have a specialized labor pool, and these people really know, and they have a certain amount of insurance and what have you to be able to operate this risky job. It's really just protection. Go ahead and talk about what happened like in New York in like the 80s and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah. So I think the argument is that they have all these requirements made of them for trainings and inspections to make sure that their vehicles meet certain requirements and that they're trained in first aid or whatever, or, you know, how to drive on the right-hand side of the road, and somehow that this translates into public safety. But regarding the medallions, the history on that, I believe, goes back to the Great Depression, where taxi drivers at the time were seeking a way to maintain their fare, their rates that they had at the time, because the price of everything started dropping. And they wanted to maintain how much money they could bring in. So there was an artificial limit put on the number of taxis that could be had. So the City of New York licensed them and gave them medallions for their cars. And it remained at that same number. I don't recall what the number was, but let's say 5,000 for the sake of argument. It stayed 5,000 for 40 years, which sounds crazy.
You talk about the population of the city. It must have exploded in that amount of time.
Yeah, and it's all an effort to limit the supply. Therefore, the price of each ride can be higher, and it also introduces all those other opportunities for people who are drivers, know that they have basically an unlimited demand for their product, and so they can then be more selective and choosy. And that's a nice way of saying, you know, exhibiting their racism or whatever under the guise of, well, you know, I just pick up another fare. Versus an open competition model where, you know, $1 is $1, and you don't care who's giving it to you. as long as they want your service that's being demanded.
Right. Right. And it's sold to the public as safety, but anytime you introduce a barrier to entry for any kind of entrepreneur or anybody looking to sell their labor in any market, you are reducing the quality of service that's available. And I don't think that point gets made when when some sort of new legislation comes along that seeks to impose some sort of restrictions or new onus of requirements to entry for any particular industry.
Yeah, I mean, aren't most of these requirements written by the industry themselves and the larger players in said industry? So it sort of like tips the scales in the favor of the entrenched, right? So they've got the resources and the size and the influence to get certain regulations and restrictions put upon themselves that they can more easily comply with versus some upstarts or smaller companies or, people even thinking about getting into the business would see this daunting hurdle and obstacles in their way, right? So
right.
It would basically undercut the ability of anyone to compete with you.
Right. It stopped a new competition from happening in addition to hurting any kind of lesser competition that's already out there. So you don't even necessarily always see the awesome benefits of pointing guns at people from government for you to sit back and enjoy your crappy service that you provide. But what you were saying earlier about allowing people to exhibit any kind of signs of racism and whatnot, you're talking about like Jim Crow laws. People forget that, it was government and the entrenched establishment that allowed that kind of crap to happen.
Well, yeah, it certainly gave license for it and even cover, right? Because it was the law. It was something that was permissible and allowed. And so when people say that the government is us, but the government also imposed these laws at the time that were bad, people look back and universally say that they were bad things, but it's still government. And so what's to say that government isn't doing bad things now in the minds of most people who are statists? Like, do you kind of follow what I'm saying? Like, what are they doing now that 50 years later we're going to look back on and be like, wow, that was crazy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hopefully everything, but probably not. Hopefully. But yeah, that's definitely the case. It's hard to see, the forest through the trees, but I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, well, so one of the things that I was thinking of regarding the larger companies supporting things that make competition more restrictive and more difficult is you always hear about how Walmart's so bad and they don't pay their employees very well.
Yeah.
Right, and that's usually the story that's told. But, come to find out that Walmart actually supports the higher minimum wage. They lobby for it. And it's for that very reason.
They can soak the cost.
Yeah, they're a big enough company that they can afford to, if the playing field is quote-unquote level for all retailers, they can absorb the higher costs better than most others, and therefore they will have an advantage.
Right. It's classic protectionism, using the violent arm of government to restrict competition.
So bringing it back to the Uber thing, so Uber and Lyft in Austin, Texas, they said, hey, if this vote goes against us, then we are going to pull out of this market and no longer service the market. So by saying that, it sounds like they were already, they're doing well, right? So they got consumers who wanted their product, and then when the laws come into play, they pull out. So who's hurt there? The consumers, right?
Just the consumer. Yeah.
Now, do you think that that's maybe a political strategy on their part, that people will have been using the service and now that they can't, there'd be some kind of political backlash against?
I would assume so, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're used to using the service, and enough people enjoyed it, obviously. And then they're like, well, we're taking our ball and going home because we're not cool. And then they got a fair amount of backlash from, liberal idiots who say that, oh, geez, these people are just taking their ball and going home. They're not cooperating with government and working with them. They're just very, I suppose, Atlas Shrugged type, just leaving, which I fully support. You're being threatened by some thugs with guns in a certain area. who say you have to do it our way or don't come around here. Oh, then why should I come around there? I don't want to hang out with you. You're a bunch of violent thugs. I mean, as tempting as that market is, and as much money as we could make in that market, you're saying that I have to play by your rules because you're claiming dominion over everything in this geographical area.
Right.
What
now,
gives you the right?
And Uber and Lyft aren't, you're saying, like, are they employees, are they not? So I'm sure that the people who were working for them or with them or however the terminology is, they're still in Austin, right? I would imagine, for the most part. Like,
right. Just unemployed now.
Yeah, just unemployed. So,
yep.
Who else is hurt by this? Not only consumers, but also the people who had an opportunity to earn an income, to earn some money, doing something on a platform that wasn't previously available and now is no longer available.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because Uber just got a cut of that, right? Like, as a consumer, you pay, $10 for a ride, and Uber gets a portion of that, and the driver gets a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I guess the cost to Uber to not be there is, kind of not as big of a deal, right?
Right. It's just something they didn't have before, or they didn't have again, so what are they losing out on, really? The biggest losers are the employees and the people who suffer from reduced service in and around the city of Austin, who would normally pop up their app to get a ride and now have to call like a taxi cab. So
right, which there aren't enough of, and they're probably more expensive.
Right. So, or they're probably also dirtier, whatever. Those are kind of anecdotal stories, but I've heard stories about, with Uber, after you use Uber, you rate the driver, you rate the quality of the service, and then the driver rates the passenger and the quality of the passenger. And you always want to maintain a high level of quality. Well, there's no such thing as that in the taxi world. You get some terrible taxi ride. Who do you complain to? Complain maybe.
They have a number right in there. They have a phone number to call for complaints, don't they?
There you go. I'm sure that'll take care of all issues. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, it's funny because that brings up the whole inspections of vehicles and those types of regulations. Anecdotally, I've been in several cabs myself, and many of them have been kind of scary. Like not clean, puked in, super bumpy ride, a guy talking on his headset the whole time.
Sure.
There's no feedback.
Right. You would expect if there's no feedback and there's no threat of competition, then what really incentive is there other than, really what incentive is there? To provide the best possible service. You're going to provide some service. You just definitely still want the fare. But
it's like the minimum. The minimum is what is required.
Right. You're going to get the minimum. You're not going to get above and beyond because what does he care? He's got another fare waiting as soon as you're done. He can just take his pick at the later. He doesn't have to work hard to clean up his taxi cab. And I'm not saying all taxi cabs are bad. Of course not. But you're going to get the bare minimum or, not the greatest. And even if you did get somebody trying really hard, how would you know it's the best possible service unless they had competition?
Yeah, I think I agree. Because, there might be, some people out there really trying hard and cleaning their vehicles and driving well and whatever, but there's really no feedback mechanism that impacts their bottom line versus an Uber style where every ride they're getting rated. And so if there's a bad experience, they're going to see it, and other drivers are going to see it, or other consumers are going to see it, and they're going to go, okay, I want an Uber to pick me up. Oh, not that one, though. He's a 3 out of 5 star rating. I don't want that one.
Right. So, there's a huge incentive to provide high-quality service. And there isn't such a thing when you have an entrenched monopoly like a taxi cab service. You could get, eventually, I suppose, if there was competition, taxi cabs to mock that system or to mimic it and to provide some sort of a feedback thing, which may happen. But right now, and if they get their way with all the regulations and then forcing out competition, they may not have to. But taxi cab seems like a thing that seems like an old industry. People always need to get around, but it seems like it's seems kind of like a dinosaur type of thing. Especially with the advent of self-driving cars, more and more likely there's going to be just car owners who just like turn their car on in the morning and then send it out, and it goes around picking people up, and there's not even a driver ever.
Yeah, that's almost a scary prospect.
It'll probably happen in like 100 years, or maybe the driver will just sit there and be playing his phone the whole time, and then actually touch a button if he has to, only when something goes wrong.
Yeah, so like autopilot, like in an airplane. Yeah, it's almost scary if that kind of technology becomes prevalent enough to where all of a sudden government decides, well, it's not safe to have a human operator, so that's illegal now.
I could see that happening, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you'd lose a lot of potential freedoms, to go wherever you choose.
Sure, or it could be really easy to just turn off cars if they're in a certain area, or turn off a car that you being passenger of somebody you don't agree with, or who is wanted for some particular reason, or whatever.
Yeah. Have you seen this movie? Came out probably 5-10 years ago now, called Equilibrium, with Justin Timberlake in it, I think.
I've seen a Justin Timberlake. I've seen like Out of Time. Equilibrium?
Oh, that's the one I'm thinking of. That's the one. Yeah, he's got that little chip in his arm, and it counts down how much time he has left till he dies. And so time is the new currency. Time
is the new currency. Yeah, you can like give people your time. You can like give somebody, you like swipe armbands with them or something, and you can give them like an hour or a day or whatever. And then you guys go to work, and they pay you in time. And then when your time is up, you die.
Yeah, so that's where this talk of the self-driving cars kind of made me think of that. And it also made me think about how they're talking about, banning cash or no longer creating larger bills. I think the euro just stopped printing the 500, and now there's talk of in the U.S. wanting to not print the 100 anymore due to some, fantastical nonsense about larger bills are only used for illicit activity or illegal activity, drugs, and hookers, and those types of things. And guns, of course.
Because a good, honest citizen would never have need for a large bill, right?
Yeah.
You'd never have need for 100.
That's a scary thought, to only have your funds be electronic overall, and them also being, I guess, controlled or heavily influenced and tracked by a government.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Because I mean, even now, if you're just suspected of certain crimes, they'll freeze all of your assets. So, what happens if you're falsely accused of something, but they
or even if you're
before it can even be figured out,
or even if you're rightly accused of something that shouldn't be a crime in the first place?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I have absolutely fundamental moral arguments against the drug laws, against probably most of the laws on the books in the United States or around the world. And the average person breaks how many felonies a day? I mean, it's a joke.
Yeah, all it takes is just getting on the radar of whomever.
Right. It's just a matter of, are you a target or not? Does anybody care? I mean, the average person, it doesn't matter. You make a couple felonies, it doesn't really matter. But if you were to ever become the target of somebody that didn't like you, and they could use this mechanism of power against you, it could become a very scary thing. I mean, you've seen against Enemy of the State, pretty good movie. Will Smith, Gene Hackman.
Yep. And that was
an old movie.
Yeah, the
like
level of
20 years
technology
old.
we talk about there.
Yeah, it was like 1996 or something. I mean, I'm probably off a little bit there, but it was like 20 years old or so. And they're talking about scary crap in that movie.
Yeah. Well, let's bring this back to Uber and then start to wind this down, because we're getting close to 45 minutes, and I'd like to try to keep our podcast to about an hour on a consistent basis. So Uber and Lyft are pulling out after they've already been providing some service, and so now there's a vacuum, right? There's people looking for service, and you were mentioning that there's another service that is less centralized and therefore able to get around some of these new regulations?
Right. So Arcade City is a Facebook group that has plans to release an app, but they are, even though there's a CEO, I mean, they claim they're decentralized and that they'd be operating basically just on tips and donations, which would circumvent the current laws that state, like, if you're charging for a ride, then you qualify as some sort of a service provider or what have you. But if you're not actually charged, it's all arbitrary and language-based. I mean, so, but it's just a way to circumvent the current laws. I'm sure that they'll change it to try and, control this. But for the time being, hopefully this will step in and keep people getting to where they need to go. Here's another quote from the CEO. Uber was the honey badger of ride-sharing 1.0. Laws didn't fit their model, yet they operated anyway, eventually building enough consumer support to force changes in the laws. I'm sure bureaucrats are tiring of the constant battle, but the real battle is only beginning. Central intermediaries who maintain their position through force of law will see their influence erode across every sector of business and governance. In Arcade City, we're excited to push that evolution forward as we pioneer decentralized ride-sharing 2.0. So if he's able to do that, that's fantastic. Central planners will always fail. We don't have perfect knowledge, and telling people how to live their lives is disgusting on many levels, moral level being of primary concern. But the day when you tell other people how to live and that they have to live that certain way or else I'm going to attack you, well, that's when I flip them the bird. And that's why I flip the bird to government on a daily basis, baby. Know what I'm saying, Daniel?
I do, Mr. Johnson. So it sounds like the market finds a way, and it's going to be a constant battle between the regulators and the service providers trying to get around those regulations. But, I think at some point the technology gets far enough ahead to where, it truly is like, hey, I'm picking up a friend of mine. What are you going to do about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe I just met this guy. I don't care. What doesn't matter. But I'm picking up a buddy. Yeah. What are you going to do? Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to regulate human behavior, and that never works. And it's a losing proposition. They try it with prohibition. They try it constantly. But it doesn't change people's behavior. It just moves it underground or around the law or to the side of the law or next door to the law. People figure out a way to do what they're going to do. And to stick a gun in their face and tell them, you got to do it this way or whatever, it's a losing battle, and hopefully it's one people eventually give up because it's immoral.
Well, get used to that argument, folks, because that's what Robert Johnson does. He brings the moral argument with the gun in the face. I think we should wrap this one up.
It's true. It's what I do. It's the only thing I know. Don't judge me. I never learned to read.
It holds up pretty well. So thank you for joining us for this second podcast for the readrothbard.com site. We got lectures, books, articles, and, of course, this podcast. We'll try to do it at least once weekly. And I don't know, you got anything else you want to say, Robert?
Yeah, just welcome to the podcast. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. You'll be hanging out with people who hopefully share your opinion on a lot of things, and maybe we are bringing new opinions to you that you've never quite heard before or that you thought you disagreed with, and maybe you'll give a little more time to. We're definitely in the minority in terms of the popular opinion, but we think we're right, and maybe give us a little bit of your time, and maybe you might come to see things from our perspective. But thanks for listening.
Well said. Well said. Yep, thank you guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye. The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.